So I'm going to show you a trick that I learned a long time ago from someone I know that does stereo systems. And a lot of times when you do a stereo, some of the mounting surfaces, you want them to look like carbon fiber without actually spending the money on carbon fiber, if that makes sense. So, first thing you need. Does anybody recognize that? This is toolbox drawer liner. Notice it is the webbed pattern. So those are like little X's, or what I consider the perforated pattern or webbed pattern. And this is just the basic toolbox liner. Got this at Harbor Freight. It was like $7. So the next thing I like, and this I use all the time, 2 times. This is a semi-gloss. Now you can use a gloss, you can use a flat. It's whatever you want to do. I like semi-gloss. The 2 times ultra cover paint primer works awesome. And then you want to grab some sort of a gray. So it can be a light gray, dark gray, silver. Doesn't really matter. I have a gray primer, which is more or less like a flat, just a basic gray, so which is fine. So, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So, happy Monday, everybody. Thanks for listening. I appreciate everybody subscribing. So as always, if you like what you see, you can comment, like, share, and subscribe. So we're working on the S10. This is part 2 of the video. And what we're doing now is we made the template last video for all the electronics that we're mounting. And now we're going to make the actual mounting plate out of 1/8 inch aluminum. So I already pre-cut that, marked all the holes and drilled all the holes. And what we're doing is we're going to mount it to the existing floor in the truck. I can show you. And if you watched the last video, see what I was talking about. So the way we're having it mounted, if you look, I just did a real simple bolt through design from the floor. That way it's secure. And then a washer. You have 2 there and 2 there. So basically the entire assembly, when the rug is cut, because I have to trim it obviously to cut, I got to trim this rug back. It's a little bit oversized for the cab, but I'm going to trim it back, pop the holes through, and then the plate will go there. So the customer asked me to make the plate look like carbon fiber. So what I'm doing, I'll show you, a little trick I learned. You know the toolbox liners? Just like that, with the holes. You can't use solid, obviously. You got to use the ones with the holes. So you take this mesh and you utilize it. So what I did was I pre-drilled all the holes, pre-fit everything. This is the underside. So I painted that black already. And now the top side, we'll do the same thing. So I'm going to show you on the bottom side on what we would do next once the black dries. Get yourself a can of gray. This is actually like a gray primer. Doesn't really matter. You can use gray primer. It's not going to hurt. It's all about the look. So you take this mat, if it'll let me. Hold on. And you lay it over like that. I try to line it up so it looks halfway decent, because you don't want it to look crooked. This is the bottom, by the way. It's not the top. So I just want to show you guys, because I can't hold the camera and do this on the top where it's going to really count. So Actually, let me put this camera down for a second. So once you have the mesh liner over your piece, the piece is painted black, take a little gray, and we just kind of dust it over. And there you have it. That is what we call faux carbon fiber. So I'll do the same thing to the front side. And then we'll get this bad boy mounted up. You guys can see, I can mount all the electronics, and then I just got to finish some of the wiring. I'm not going to bore you with the wiring, so I'll get that done, and then when I'm ready to hook everything up, I'll turn the video camera on and check it out. So just like I talked about in the first video, all the wires now are going to get extended to the back of the cab. I'll show you now, just in case you didn't see the first video. So what we have is we have a power lug and we have a ground lug. Those are staying. I'm going to run a main power feed with battery cable. I think it's a 6 gauge, I believe. I got to look. And a negative from the ground lug all the way underneath the carpet and all the way to the back area where we're going to mount the electronics. So all these wires right here that he has coming through the firewall, as you can see, except for this one, that's the gauge actually, that stays, it's a temp gauge. So you got all these wires here, you got all these wires here. Wires that come from the shifter, all these wires are going to get extended. And hopefully I got the right colors so I can make them all color coding, because someone liked yellow when they put this truck together. They liked yellow, they liked pink, orange, and Jesus. So anyways, I'm going to extend all those wires. Once I extend them, I'm going to run them underneath. Let me grab my light here because it's kind of dark inside the truck today. It's kind of gloomy outside. So those wires are going to run. I'm either going to run them underneath along the kick panel here and behind the passenger seat, which I think might be better, to the back area here, because that's where the plate is going. As you can see, the 4 mounting studs that I created, put those through the floor. They are tight. I trimmed the carpet back, so now the carpet is not overlapping. So let's go paint this panel. So after mounting everything, we fit it back into the truck, and it looks pretty good actually. I like it. So everything's nice and neat. Directly behind the seats, as you can see, it'll mount. It's got 2 studs on each side. You got 1, 2 there. We got 1, 2 over there. Carpet's nice and neat. We cut it all back so it's flush. So now all the wires. So we have our main power feed here, which comes from the ARC. That's going to go back to the power lug. There's not much I can do about that other than I have to run a main wire. So that'll be the only wire that's not removable, because I did not want to put another power lug. So, but it'll be nice. So now the ignition side of your ARC, instead of having 5 or 6 wires coming off of it like it did before, which is wrong, it's going to power up this fuse panel here, and it'll put power to any other components that we need as far as accessories, and those are all your grounds for your accessories, and everything will be labeled and marked. So all the wiring from the MSD go to the back. Whatever goes to your progressive is going to go here, and then over here we're going to mount the 2 relays for the nitrous solenoids. Obviously they're going to get wired into the progressive, and then you're going to have your trans brake solenoid as well, which also gets wired in the mix. So pretty wild. Came out nice. So I printed up the Edelbrock wiring, and because we have 2 fuel solenoids, 2 nitrous solenoids on the vehicle. We have 2 relays. They both get wired to each other, and then obviously wired like this. Trans brake relay we have. So the trans brake relay is now going to be an activation relay. I don't know how it was wired before because it didn't seem like it was correct. But now we have the MSD with a 2-step. So the 2-step stays on the 87 pole. So that way when your switched power comes in from the ARC panel, it turns on your wide open throttle switch. So when you are activating your trans brake, the relay activates and it goes to the 87 pole, which turns on your 2-step. And when you release your trans brake, it shuts off and goes to the 87A, which activates the wide open throttle switch. That's how that relay would work. And then obviously it would power up your 30 pole to your activation side of your nitrous relays, which turns on the power coming in here at 30, and it clicks it off at the 87, which now activates the progressive. I know it's confusing. And then the progressive progresses both fuel and nitrous solenoids through ground off of the progressive itself. So I'm just kind of reusing what he had. He had the 2 nitrous relays. He had a trans brake relay there. So we're mounting them like that. And we're going to start wiring it up. So that's all set before we put it in the car. So without boring everybody, I'm not going to film all the wiring. I'm just going to kind of give you a breakdown of, what I'm going through to try to figure out the wiring. Because he bought used equipment, I don't have all the installation instructions, so I had to print some of them out. The Edelbrock Progressive, I was just looking it up on my laptop. There's a few different ways that you can wire it based on situations. So I'm just trying to figure that out right now so I can wire that properly. Just to give you a little breakdown of what's going on. So I'm pre-wiring everything right now. That can be wired here. Then I'll put it in the truck. It'll be a lot easier than leaning over. So as you can see, what I have going on here is your main battery power comes into the bottom of the ARC. You have a main ground that comes into the ground post on the fuse panel. So now these are all grounded. I already started running some of my grounds. The MSD requires a battery ground, which this is your battery ground. It'll be directly to the battery ground lug. So you have this ground now coming off of there. The MSD also requires a 12-volt battery feed. So I actually put the battery feed to the top part of the ARC, which has a stud that's accessible. So that way if you have to disconnect, you can. So that is main battery feed, which is the red wire obviously coming in. Now, this is number 2 relay. Got these nice little labels. I like shrink wrap on all fittings. That way it keeps everything clean, no moisture, or at least keeps the moisture level down. And then also I like to number. So we have number 2. Number 2 is his ignition switch on the ARC box. So that would be ignition relay that turns on the ignition feed, number 2, to your fuse box. So now your fuse box, when the ignition is powered through the ARC panel, these will power up. So now you will have power individually. So now we have our 12-volt switching source for the MSD. I had to make some extensions here, so it is what it is. It's a used setup. Now notice simple crimp connections, heat shrink. You don't have to get crazy. It's not that important. You don't have to solder every single joint. If you solder every joint, you can actually cause more resistance. What happens with a soldered joint, if it's not perfectly connected, all strands of wire touching, you cause resistance. That is what I was taught years ago, and that is what I'm going to go with. If you think differently, that's fine. It's always worked for me, and that's how I'm doing it. You got your 12-volt feed off the ignition side. Comes from the fuse box to your Edelbrock. And you got your ground, which runs all the way up to your ground bus bar. So just kind of getting things neatened up. As you can see, this tape that I use is actually cloth. So I like the cloth tape. It is an electrical style cloth tape. You can buy it on Amazon or online, wherever. But it's really nice. It does not look all kind of cheesy like a regular electrical tape. I don't like that shiny look of the electrical tape. So, but yeah, I use basic connectors. I do have some heat shrink style connectors here, which work really good too. But they're identical to what you get on a basic, blue connector. It's the same exact internals, and I do the heat shrink around it. That way you get a double layer. Even when I do these, I crimp it, shrink it, and then I put heat shrink around it. So there's really no difference. That's what I've always used. So let me get rolling on this. See if I can figure out this Edelbrock wiring. Get everything wired up here. Get all the wires extended in the cab. And rock and roll. Good morning, everybody. It is, I think it's Wednesday. So I've been on this S10 now for a couple days, and it was a lot worse than we figured. I was finding a lot of wires that I can't leave a wire that I know is going to be an issue or is not correct. So I'll just show you a little update. I've done a lot of rewiring so far. I had to make a bunch of different harnesses, trace a lot of wires back. He had a lot of wires that were incorrectly installed, especially on like the cooling fans. He had two power wires going to both sides of the switching side of a relay for the trans cooler fan. I noticed the ARC relay panel looked like it got hot at one time, and I would imagine that's because it was backfeeding power from the wrong side. So hopefully everything seems to be okay. It seems like everything works, but my guess is that trans cooler fan was not working. So I had to rewire that. So here's a little, it looks a whole lot better, as you can see. Oh, let me turn this out here. So if you look, underneath the dash now, we got power and ground lug. There's only going to be a few wires coming off of that. What I did was I actually remade this harness so far, and this one I extended all the way back, so it now goes back there. It looks like, you know, mess there, but that's actually just extra wire. That's part of the harness, and basically it's going to end in this area right here. The trans brake button was wired scary, so that's all getting rewired. You can see the trans brake button for the actual solenoid goes through the floor here. That's the ground. The ground goes up to the actual mount. That's okay. The ground is fine because it's mounted to steel to the floor here. But some of these wires actually I can eliminate now because he had a random power coming in for trans brake instead of powering it up off the ARC. So we're going to, anything that's an accessory is going to be wired through the ignition side of the ARC. It's just safer. So, but as you can see, it's a whole lot better than what it was. So no more mess over here. Cleaned up all the wires over here. Reran the power feed. That is a power feed for the fan relays up front. So I'm leaving that to the power lug here. It's fine. It requires 12-volt battery power. It's not a big deal. All that's going to get covered. The two lugs are going to get covered. So when the rug goes back on, you can't damage it. I was just straightening up and following wires under the dash because there was a lot of mess over here. I had to rewire some of the other, like the starter feed was wrong. A couple other feeds were wrong. So that's an update. It's been kind of a long process, but that's how wiring goes. You got to just chip away at it and eventually. So I pulled the seat out. I'll show you. I pulled the passenger seat out to make my life a lot easier. But basically the new harness that I have here, it will get a nice nylon sheathing. So it'll be wrapped nice. It'll be clean. It's going to probably run in the vicinity of through the rug over here. So it comes out from behind over here where the mount's going to be. So, and that's where the electronics are going to go. So just a little update. So gotta keep rolling. So just a tech tip for everybody that's getting into wiring or has done wiring. I have a tool here that I bought a long time ago. It is a Mac tool crimping tool. There's other brands out there. So basically, excuse me, this tool has replaceable head units. So I can crimp anything from your regular wire connectors. This one is for like the battery cable ends. It does the 4-position crimp, which I'm using right now on the battery cables. So I just wanted to kind of show you that. This works really well and it does a proper crimp. So this is the crimping tool, like we just talked about. These are the ends. They're just a basic 6-gauge battery terminal end. And what I'm doing is I'm running the battery cables from the main panel now to our lugs. So basically you just strip it back, put the terminal over the wire. I'll get it, don't worry. And as you squeeze down, it does a nice 4-position crimp. So I already put my heat shrink ready to go. Take my torch and I heat shrink around so that way only the end is exposed. Keeps it a lot neater and safer. So I wanted to show you that, because if you're trying to do it any other way, there are other tools. But if you don't get a proper crimp, especially on a battery end, a cable end, like a 6-gauge or a 4-gauge or something that's requiring an exact 12 volts of feed or more, because some cars run on 16 volts if it's a race car. And there you go. So we have our positive and our negative. And these are going to run down here, and I'll show you that. And basically they're all getting wrapped in this nice mesh sheathing, which is very good for protective purposes. So that's my cool little tool. As always, thanks for watching. Stay tuned. We got part 3. Give you the completion on the S10 wiring. It has been a tough one. A lot of wires I had to change. So I appreciate you guys watching. Subscribe, like, comment, and share. Definitely get the word out there. I'm trying to build something here so you guys can enjoy it and I can too. Thanks for watching.